Let's talk about the Caatinga. So the Caatinga is the fourth biome in terms of size, covering 10% of the country. This is the Caatinga. It's basically in the area that we call the northeastern Brazil. Okay, only technically Minas Gerais, the state here, is in the southeast, so there's a small part of the Caatinga in Minas Gerais, but most of it is in the northeast. It's surrounded by the Cerrado to the west, and also the south here, and to the Atlantic forest here to the east. Okay, it's also not very far from the Amazon if you think about this area here. Caatinga means white forest in the Tupi language. That's because you're going to see some pictures that during the dry season, when the trees lose their leaves, you have a white aspect to the landscape, to the forest. It's a thorn scrub and seasonally dry forest. Okay, a combination of thorn scrub and seasonally dry forests. It occupies 900,000 square kilometers in Brazil, covering 10 states, like in the northeast. It's a very, very dry region. The rainfall goes as low as 240 up to 1,500 millimeters. Half of the Caatinga gets less than 750 millimeters. Remember, when compared even to the Cerrado, which is drier than the Amazon and the Atlantic forest, you start from 1,500. Okay, you usually don't have areas with less than 1,500. So the Caatinga, that's the most that you get. And also it's very seasonal. So 50 to 70% of the rainfall occurs during 3 consecutive months. So you have at least 9 months of drought. This is the map of the Caatinga showing the precipitation. So you see, of course, the areas that are near the ocean, adjacent to the Cerrado here or to the Atlantic forest here, they get more rain. But as you go inland, you get really low, especially in the middle here, less than 400, less than 600, and then less than 400 in some areas, right? The rivers of the Caatinga, there are many rivers here, but most of them are not are temporary, are not perennial. Okay, are intermittent rivers. Here's some of the hydrographic features. You have this Maranhão Piauí ecoregion with the rivers draining here. You have most of the rivers here draining to the ocean, as well as here draining to the Atlantic forest and the ocean. And then here I have the São Francisco, which is the major river system going through the middle of the Caatinga. Okay, this is a major river that's a perennial river, and with this but many of these tributaries are temporary. Okay, the São Francisco headwaters are in the Cerrado in Minas Gerais, and then it stretches through the Cerrado and then enters the Caatinga, and then actually ends here at the coast of the Atlantic Ocean. The definition of the Caatinga, the limits of the Caatinga that I just showed you in the previous slide with the Brazilian, with the other biomes in Brazil, is different from what recent scientists suggest. So the main difference is that this area here in the state of Piauí, according to this book and this group of scientists, is not part of the Caatinga, but it's part of the Cerrado. On the other hand, this whole area here in Bahia and Piauí and a bit in Minas Gerais, which IBGE, the official biome map of Brazil, puts in the Cerrado, these authors actually considered as part of the Caatinga. Okay, so you're going to see some differences, but that happens to other biomes as we saw before, especially the Atlantic forest. There's some controversy here, but anyway, so some of the maps you're going to see this definition of the Caatinga, including the São Francisco Gurgueia area and excluding the Campo Maior area. There are some pictures of some very nice places in the Caatinga. This is Serra da Capivara National Park. It's a very important site here in Piauí. It's one of the most important archaeological sites in South America. You have amazing rock paintings, huge walls of rock paintings. You have evidence of early humans. Actually, there's some authors have just suggested that the presence of humans here as far as more than 30 or even 50,000 years ago, but that's really controversial. Most scientists today, the vast majority of scientists, I would say 99% would disagree with that interpretation and actually place the human arrival in South America to 14,000 years ago, okay? But anyway, it's a very important, relevant, regardless, it's a very important, relevant archaeological site and also a natural history site. This is Raso da Catarina, which is in Bahia. Very nice landscape, famous region for especially the fauna. The blue macaw is here. Also the three-banded armadillos, an endangered species, is also a protected area, very important for the Caatinga. And here's the Chapada Diamantina in Bahia too. Right here at the Espinhaço Range, an amazing landscape. Is the valley here. You have the tabletop Mount de Chapada and the plateaus. It's an amazing place. It's very relevant because actually Chapada Diamantina combines three different biomes in the same place. You have the Caatinga, but you also have Cerrado, and you also have Atlantic forest here. So on the tops you have some forests that have elements of the Atlantic forest, have animal and plant species from the Atlantic forest occurring here as isolated patches. And also you have Cerrado, areas of Cerrado and Cerrado plant species and animal species occurring here. So it's a meeting point for different kinds of habitats and very relevant. This is the Enchanted Lake, Lago Encantado. Very, very nice place. This is very deep. It's like 60 meters deep and you can see the bottom. You know, the rocks at the bottom and the logs at the bottom. It's amazing, amazing place. Really, really beautiful, clear, crystal clear water. It's worth a visit if you have a chance. Regarding the origin evolution of the Caatinga, of the vegetation and the biome as a whole, so it's the largest tropical dry forest in South America. Some authors argued for a recent origin of the Caatinga, very recent, like actually man-made, like the biome was actually a result of human occupation in the Holocene in the last 10,000 years or so, 15,000 years. But that's not true. I mean, all the evidence points to a very old origin for the whole environment, although humans actually have had a connection to the biome for a long time and have changed the landscape for a long time. So current species of plants, especially that you have in the Caatinga, trace to more than 11 million years ago. And they're related to species that occur in other areas far away. So like here on the coast of, in dry lands in the coast of Venezuela and Colombia. So you have species here related to these species, and you also have species here related to species from southern Bolivia and northern Argentina here. Okay, so that calls attention to the effect that I mentioned before of this dry diagonal, this combining these areas here, especially the Cerrado, Caatinga, and Chaco. They form this dry diagonal that allows species adapted to drier areas and to open environments to move around here, okay, through time, evolutionarily speaking. And it's also a kind of a barrier between forest species, moist forest species of the Amazon and the Atlantic forest. But with time and climate change, especially the climatic oscillations of the Pleistocene, and so you have humid and hot periods and dry and cold periods. This make a big difference here. So you probably had connections and disconnections of species, connecting the Amazon with the Atlantic forest during the wet periods, and then isolating and connecting the open area species during the dry and cold periods. Okay, and here in terms of the connection between the Caatinga and the coast here, it's probably through the continental shelf here during dry periods when the level of the ocean was lower, and then you have the continental shelf here allowing the connection between these two areas. But anyway, in addition to this relationship, you have in situ speciation. So despite this old connections with the other dry lands, there are several, most species actually originated in here and have ancestors in here. In terms of plants, the flora, we can divide the Caatinga into two major biotas, different compositions. One is what scientists call the crystalline Caatinga, so that grows on crystalline soils, on hard rock and older soils, and the sedimentary Caatinga, which grows on sedimentary soils and younger soils usually. Okay. On the map here, you have the crystalline areas in dark gray and the sedimentary areas in light gray. Okay. You also have limestone, karstic areas, which is limestone in ochre here. And then you have some transition areas, which are called ecotones, here with the Atlantic forest, here with the Amazon, sorry, here with the Cerrado here. And you have the karstic areas around. So here you see that the crystalline Caatinga in the rainy season, really green, in the dry season, really white, which gives the name Caatinga, white forest, okay? That's another area in Bahia during the rainy season. That's a karstic area, the limestone here. Usually you have caves, important caves like the one I showed before with the Enchanted Lake. And this is the examples of the sedimentary Caatinga. So here you have the sedimentary Caatinga at the Serra da Capivara National Park. These are the sand dunes of the San Francisco River. So adjacent to the San Francisco River here to the on the left margin, you have this sand dune habitat, very important with endemic species that only occur there, lizards, of rats and other animals. This is a Rupicolous area, rocks and Inselberg in Bahia. And that's also a Rupicolous area on a karstic area, okay, in Bahia as well. Okay, so you have different looks for the Caatinga here. Here's some more pictures. So in a karstic area, this is during the wet season. Cactus are always present in the Caatinga. You're always going to see some cactus in the landscape, like here. One of the famous cactus, Chique-Chique. Mandacaru is another famous cactus. This is a typical Caatinga, the white forest, right? That's a vaqueiro or sertanejo. The sertão is the Caatinga is also called the sertão in Portuguese, the dry lands. And that's a typical man of the sertão, a sertanejo, cowboy here. They wear leather clothes, leather jackets, leather pants, and leather hats, because otherwise they will be, destroyed by the vegetation, which is very, thorny and full of spines. And so to survive there, you have to wear those leather, almost like an armor. And sometimes even the animals are protected with leather. Okay, so running after a cow here. So the cactus here, typical Caatinga view. Some vegetation profiles. So to give you an idea of the different kinds. So you have a more arboreal Caatinga, where when you have like more water. And so you see some palm trees here. That's the arboreal Caatinga when there's water available, either in the soil or especially in the soil. That's a shrubby Caatinga. So you have some shrubs, cactus. Okay, you have more cactus here. Here you don't have many cactus. The dry forest, or mata seca in Portuguese. I'll show you this species, the barriguda, the tree in a moment. And the carrasco. Carrasco only occurs in very specific places. And in the Araripe region, and a few other regions. It's a very thorny and full of vines, and it's a very tangled area. Very hard to walk, to go through. Plant diversity. Oh, here's the barriguda, the tree that I showed you before. They accumulate water in the trunk, so that's why they get swallowed. Barriguda or big belly tree. That's the umbuzeiro, another important fruit tree with a fruit that's edible and very tasty and with lots of water. So very important in the Caatinga. And so the Caatinga is another neglected biome, like the Cerrado. Okay, people didn't pay much attention to very recently, and thought this as a second, not as important as the Atlantic forest or the Amazon. So it's a very neglected, but there's a very important diversity of flowering plants, more than 3,300 species. Not a lot of endemism when you compare to the Atlantic forest or even the Cerrado. Usually you have more than 30% endemism. Here you only have 15% endemic species, almost 1,000 genera and 150 families of flowering plants. Non-woody species are very important to the diversity. So many species are not woody, not tall trees like this one or this one. Okay, they're usually small cactus, bromeliads, and other small flowering plants. Actually, the species density is higher in the Caatinga than the Amazon. So in a single area, like in a square kilometer, you have more species in the Caatinga than in the Amazon, which is kind of weird to think about that. But that's what scientists concluded by studying the flora of the Caatinga. I'm talking about flowering plants. Most species are not endemic to the Caatinga, so that's why you have a low level of endemism. So most species are shared with other tropical biomes, right? Some typical animals, the three-banded armadillo, which in Portuguese is called tatu bola or ball armadillo, because it rolls like a ball. So here's the head, and it fits perfectly with the tail here, and it really, that's the way they protect from predators. So it's a really neat animal. Endangered species of the Caatinga. Another endangered species is Lear's macaw, another Rhynchus lear. There's another blue little macaw from the Caatinga, which is actually extinct in nature. There's only captive breeding animals, Cyanopsitta spixi, but that's another one. This one is still alive and still, it's endangered, but still alive, still running in the Caatinga, flying around the Caatinga. That's the rock cavy, macaw, it's called. It's a rodent that's endemic to the Caatinga. Lizard, like this one, many lizards like this one. This is the Caatinga lancehead, also endemic to the Caatinga. The Araripe mannequin. Araripe is one of the chapadas, one of the plateaus in the border between Ceará and Pernambuco. And also hummingbirds like this one, the broad-tipped hermit, also endemic to the Caatinga. The vertebrate diversity, again, it's relevant. It's not as high as in tropical forests, but it's also relevant. You have almost 100 species of amphibians, 20 of them endemic, almost 80 species of lizards, more than 500 species of birds, and almost more than 180 species of mammals. Okay. When you look at the diversity on the map, the richness of amphibians, for example, you see that the highest richness are along the Atlantic forest edge here. Okay, you have more species here than you have, for instance, with the border with the Cerrado here. Okay, so there's more species here, and then some chapadas like the Chapada do Araripe, Chapada Diamantina. Also, here's the richness of reptiles is different. You see, some diversity at the border between the Atlantic forest, but it's not as marked as for amphibians. Maybe because amphibians they need more water to reproduce, right? So the reptiles are not as dependent on water as amphibians. So You have diversity here in the interior part of the Caatinga, not in the driest areas, but here you do have a large amount of diversity. In terms of human occupation and land use, like I mentioned before, the first humans that we are sure about arrived about 12,000 years ago. In the 16th century, when the Europeans first arrived, the population was estimated at 100,000 people in the Caatinga. In the 17th century, they discovered that the soils are good for pasture, okay? And then people started occupying the Caatinga. It's actually the most populated dry forest worldwide. There's almost 30. In 2010, there were almost 30 million people in the Caatinga, living in the Caatinga. It's one of the poorest populations in the country. Okay, the Human Development Index is low compared to other areas of the country. So it's most people, apart from the large cities, most people actually make direct use of natural resources. Okay, live in the and extract their needs from nature. Okay, 62% of the Caatinga has been modified by humans as a consequence of that. It's usually small-scale agriculture. Fuel wood is very common. So people burn wood for fire, for very common. There's free grazing of domestic goats are also very widespread. People have goats and goat milk and goat meat are used by the population. But you have some areas of irrigated agriculture, especially in the Jaíba, in Minas Gerais, and also in the Petrolina area, that you have irrigation and agriculture and very good results in production of fruit and also wine from the São Francisco River. Mining also occurs in some places, and charcoal production also occurs in some places. Here's a look at the impact of fire. You see the fire is more common here at the edge with the Cerrado. The road impact, those are the roads in the area. The deforestation impact. Okay, so you see that in the south here. And this is the total human impact. So you see that most areas are heavily impacted by humans. You have very few white patches along the Caatinga. Here's a comparison of the main disturbance vectors. The more conserved sites are to the west and to the south. So usually, here in Bahia, in Minas Gerais, and here in Piauí and Bahia. It's also, usually where you have less people. Okay, so the human population is higher in the Ceará, near the ocean here, also along the border here with the Atlantic forest, and then here, and then these are areas that are more remote. Okay, in terms of infrastructure, also follows people. Okay, so the areas with less people have less infrastructure. The grazing is very high here and here. So even in areas that are not populated like this region here, you have grazing as an impact. Okay, logging is spread all over the place, especially in the north and the center. Logging is not very relevant in the south. And fire is important here in the Ceará and in Piauí, mainly Ceará, Piauí, and some areas here. Okay, so although half of the original vegetation of the Caatinga still remains, most remaining fragments suffer from what they call chronic anthropogenic disturbances. So it's different from the Cerrado, where the occupation is like recent and then the destruction was strong and recent. This is something that's been going on in a chronic way. So for a long, long time, people have been occupying and even adapting to that. So like I said, the people who live there are kind of adapted to the uncertainty of rain and to the dryness of the place. Okay. And other thing that they found in this work is that the larger fragments, as they are as disturbed as the smaller fragments. So sometimes in the Cerrado, in the Atlantic forest, you see that the larger fragments are usually less disturbed than the smaller fragments. In the Caatinga, no, you have even the larger fragments are because they have been intensively used for many years. They are also disturbed. Okay, so it's really hard to find intact, pristine Caatinga. Right, that's it.